Helen Herncott, I think, sums it up.
Well, on that note, then, to our top story, the Prime Minister is set to strike a one-in, one-out migrant deal with the French as President Emmanuel Macron's state visit comes to an end.
Up to the new deal, up to 50 migrants could be returned to France weekly, but some are saying it doesn't go far enough, and even asking if Macron played Sir Keir.
Well, the two leaders have agreed migrant crossings require shared solutions in their language. The final details of the deal are expected to be announced at the Anglo-French summit later today.
Which we'll be covering. It comes after mounting pressure on French authorities to take tougher action to reduce small boat crossings. Nigel Farage challenged Sir Keir on the anticipated deal at yesterday's PMQs.
Country demands that you say to the French president... Will you shut up? We will not accept undocumented males across the English Channel, and that you are not dictated to by an increasingly arrogant, anti-Brexit French president.
Nigel Farage there. Someone said, will you shut up? While he's speaking. Now, I think Reform UK will probably weaponise that going to the election. That is how you are talked about when you're trying to raise the issue of migration in Parliament. Will you shut up?
Isn't there a theory that it was actually Lee Anderson saying, will you shut up to somebody who was talking while Nigel was talking?
Yeah, maybe.
I think that's
he turned round. It looked like, well, perhaps that's right. Anyway, that follows as more than 44,000 migrants reached British shores via small boats since the 2024 election, including 20,600 so far this calendar year. Oh, God. To discuss this in the studio, now we have Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddie Gray. Thank you very much for joining us, Freddie. Well, perhaps you're right, Freddie, but it looked like he was being shouted down.
Oh, well, he was. He was. That's, I think, why Lee Anderson was saying, will you shut, which he was trying to control the situation. But, I mean, it's very bad. It's very bad. It's very bad etiquette. It shows a complete lack of respect to an elected representative and the leader of a party which is leading in the polls. So, yes, it's a very bad look.
It's just
ugly.
Utterly depressing when we've had the week we've had with bad news financially, and, you know, Macron over here. And I think the front page of The Sun, I'm just going to hold this up today, doing what tabloids do, saying they're...
Yeah, kicking the goals.
Yeah, absolutely. No one over here is convinced that Macron being over here has done us any good whatsoever.
Well, it feels like we're being spun pretty heavily. I mean, there was the sort of will they, won't they sign this deal all week. They were obviously going to sign this deal. Labour wouldn't have been talking about this deal at the beginning of the week if they didn't know that Macron had come over and they were going to announce a deal. The problem is the deal doesn't amount to much, or it certainly doesn't appear to so far. They think a maximum of 80 returns a week.
50 small boat returns a week.
50 small boat returns a week, but they were saying up to 80 by the end of the year. 80 people actually returned by the end of the year.
We've had 40,000.
We're having about 84 a week.
Yeah.
So it's one in, one out is not what the British people want.
No,
they want a lot more out. And they certainly don't want this idea that if you just take in one because they happen to have an association with a family member. We've got into lots of trouble already with that through legal migration. This is not the sort of drastic action that the British people are looking for on the border. And I think everybody's been saying Keir Starmer needs a win, Keir Starmer needs a win. He's had such a bad time politically. I think Labour are going to try and announce this as a win, and the British public and a lot of the papers and so on are going to say it's not a win.
I think, Freddie, what's happening here, this is a pilot scheme. In the same way with Rwanda, we sent 2 people back to Rwanda to prove the country was safe. That was a voluntary return, of course. That was weaponised by Labour as saying how it failed. But that was also a pilot scheme. So this is a pilot scheme to send... well, frankly, 1 for every 17 arriving. But if they can prove this to work, they can make the case for it to the wider European Commission. But there were 5 countries who objected earlier this week, and that's because if this is allowed to happen, these individuals who are returned will go back to their first country they arrived in European Union, not France, but those in southern Mediterranean
Italy,
countries.
Greece.
Correct.
Well, it doesn't get round the biggest problems, and this actually introduces a new problem of European resistance. There was no EU resistance to the Rwanda scheme as such. But that we still can't get around the basic legal problems. They will still have legal appeals to go through, which we can't get around, which brings us back to the ECHR debate, which we're going to have inevitably about whether we really can fix the migrant crisis without some drastic change, not just in European human rights law, but in British human rights law too. So I think that's where we are with this. And, you know, Rwanda was a pilot scheme that never happened, but at least it was sort of drastic sounding. Yeah. This isn't even drastic sounding.
No. And what happened to the actually just simply stopping the boats? I think what most people want now is not one in, one out. We don't want any in. We just want to stop those boats coming over. 40,000 in the year Labour have been in power.
Well, quite. And just seeing photos of French police officers slashing the odd boat.
One boat.
They're actually reducing... They're catching less boats at the moment than they have been already this year. So it's not working. It's not a good idea. It's a dodgy pilot scheme. And it's not a win for Keir Starmer.